So in the video today, we're going to be talking about Halloween, a possible Halloween rapture, change from mortal to immortal. We're going to talk about the days of Noah. And we're talking about a star sign that up until now, I was totally unaware of. I had no idea that this star sign even existed. Somebody sent me a link to a video that I'm going to leave the link to in the description box of this video. And the presenter was a very good researcher, very thorough, a very good presenter, and he shared some amazing things about a star sign that actually was in the Bible. It's in the Bible, but apparently this guy didn't know anything about it. I spent the last couple of days just working on what I'm going to present to you today, and I do hope that you will share this video. And even if you don't agree with a lot of the things that I believe or things that I'm sharing on my channel, I still think you're going to find the information in this video very intriguing. So in Genesis, God gave us the reasons for why he put the stars and the sun and the moon in the sky. There were four main reasons. First of all was to give light by day and the moon by night. And the second one was for signs. Okay, then for seasons, that is the Moedim, the appointed times, and then as a calendar for days and years. Those are the four main reasons why the sun and moon and stars are in the heavens. As believers, and I know for myself, I was very resistant to studying or looking at the constellations of the zodiac, very resistant to, having anything to do with anything that might smack of astrology, because the Bible prohibits astrology and looking to the stars for omens and fortune telling and all of that. But that is all a corruption of what God had originally intended for his people. As the signs of the constellations, go through the ecliptic plane, and as the sun moves through the constellations, this is God's big calendar. This is how we are to calculate time. And not only that, but the movements and positions of planets and the constellations also give us signs too. And the signs have to do with significant inflection points in God's prophetic redemptive plan. So like the Star of Bethlehem appeared before Christ was born, and like the Revelation 12 sign appeared in 2017, these are the kinds of signs that we would expect to see at inflection points. So the wise men in the East, they were able to determine that this alignment, whatever they saw as being his star in the East, they were able to ascertain what that was. And we were able to see the Revelation 12 sign. The movements of the sun, moon, and stars do act as this great celestial clock, and they help us to understand when these gigantic spiritual inflection points are going to take place. Both God and Satan veil things. They both hide things. And we can say that these hidden things are actually being occulted. Now, the word occult actually has kind of a negative connotation, but it simply means something that's hidden from view or secret, something that's not easily apprehended. Now, Satan has his hidden or occult agenda, and believe it or not, God has his too. And God's hidden agenda are things that he has occulted and then apocalypted, that he's revealed. There are a lot of things in the Old Testament that weren't known about what God's eternal plan would be. Things like the church was unknown in the Old Testament. It was a mystery. And that's the other word that we can use instead of this rather negative word. But it's very similar in that the negative connotation, the sort of satanic secret societies and the occult, They have secrets that are hidden from people unless they've been initiated into the society or the cult. And believe it or not, God has secrets too that he has revealed, but they are only revealed to people who are also initiated by him in the power of the Holy Spirit, that they are born again through Christ. And Paul was one of these people that God chose to reveal these mysteries. Okay, and as we're going to see, there are other things that have been occulted or hidden, and things that God hid originally, but they were meant to be known, that Satan has sort of put the veil on so that we don't look at them. And one of these things is the implications of what we see going on in the sun, moon, and stars. So this is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through 10 about secrets that God has. Yet among the mature, we do impart wisdom, though it's not a wisdom of this age or the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. So the opposite of something that's being occulted or hidden is things that are revealed. And the book of Revelation is also called the Apocalypse. And believe it or not, the word apocalypse does not mean the end of the world. What it means is an unveiling, an uncovering, a revealing, or a revelation. So the book of Revelation is actually the unveiling or the unocculting of what has been hidden, and not only a revealing of the things that God chose not to reveal until the end times, but also things that Satan has deliberately tried to obfuscate from our understanding. Revelation 1:1 says this, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his bondservants what things it behooves to take place in quickness. And he signified it through having sent his angel to his servant John. And Amos 3:7, for the Lord God does nothing without revealing his secret to his servants, the prophets. So what I want to do now is actually examine. It's not a constellation, but it is a grouping of stars called the Pleiades that are in the constellation of Taurus. And if you have access to a kind of dark nighttime sky, you can find the Pleiades. They're not hard to find. They're a pretty nice little grouping of stars. And the Bible actually talks about the Pleiades. Now, the Bible does not talk about the zodiac, but it does talk about the Mazzaroth, which is the Hebrew word for the zodiac. And the 12 signs that are in the Mazzaroth are basically the same 12 signs or same 12 constellations that we have in our modern zodiac today. And the thing that's really interesting is that the depiction of the zodiac throughout the world in all different cultures is basically the same. So the same 12 signs that we're familiar with in our zodiac is the same signs that have been in other zodiacs from other cultures throughout time, throughout the world, and from antiquity to the present, which in itself is quite amazing. There's only a few little discrepancies here and there, but basically it's the same star signs, same 12 groups of constellations. And this is really a remarkable testimony to God, who in the beginning actually gave all these stars their names. Isaiah 40, verse 26, lift up your eyes and see who created these, who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name. By the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. And Psalm 147:4, he determines the number of the stars, and he gives to all of them their names. So Adam, because he had dominion of the earth, was able to name the creatures on the earth. But God is the Lord of the heavens, and he names the stars. Now, there's one little grouping of stars. It's not a constellation, it's a star cluster, and it's in the constellation of Taurus the Bull. And this little star cluster, the Pleiades, is mentioned 3 times in the Old Testament. So it's a group of about 6 or 7 visible stars. And this group of stars, the Pleiades, is going to be our discussion for today about a potential star sign for the last days. So Job 9:9, he is the maker of the Bear and Orion, of the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. Now, the southern direction here is actually going to be kind of important, and you are going to be able to, on October 31st, go outside at midnight, look to the south, look straight up, and you're going to be able to see the Pleiades. Job 38:31 through 35 is an absolutely fascinating passage that is really overlooked when it comes to talking about signs in the heavens. And I had no idea everything that was in this passage. And the gentleman whose video I watched did not use any of these passages from the Bible, but had he known about them or had he understood what these passages say, he would have been able to dovetail them into his presentation. This passage in Job 38:31 through 35 is going to mention the word Mazzaroth, the Pleiades, Orion, which is a constellation, talk about the bear and her cubs, and it's going to talk about a flood too. Let's look at this passage, and I'm going to try to sort of flesh it out for you a little bit. Can you bind the chains, or some Bibles will say the influence? Can you bind the chains or influence of the Pleiades, or loosen the belt of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations, and that word there is Mazzaroth, in their seasons, or lead out the bear and her cubs? Do you know the laws of heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? Can you command the clouds so that a flood of water covers you? Can you send the lightning bolts, or the word there is actually the flashes or the glitterings, on their way? Do they report to you? Here we are. We're just going to kind of look at this, and we're going to sort of take it apart for you here, and you'll see later on how this will play into the end times. First, it says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Okay, so chains are something that you use to hold things together. What he's asking Job here is, can you hold together the stars in the Pleiades? Can you keep them from kind of exploding, as we're going to see here in a minute? The Taurid meteor shower actually irradiates as stars coming from the Pleiades. So what God is saying here is, can you bind them so that this meteor shower doesn't happen? Can you keep the Pleiades from sending forth stars? Can you loosen the belt of Orion? In other words, here's 3 stars that are together in the belt of Orion. And again, this is a constellation that's easy to see and easy to point out. It's also in the southern sky. These stars never move. Verse 32, can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? So as the constellations go through the ecliptic plane, their positions, and the sun in the positions of these constellations tells you where you're at in the year. It's a time indicator. Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? So this passage is extremely fascinating, and I don't even really fully grasp the implications for this, but there are certain laws of the heavens, the celestial heavens, that is where the stars are, the sun, moon, and stars, and they have a certain amount of dominion over the earth, that the influence of the Pleiades affects the earth. Okay, that there is a correlation between what we see coming, the stars coming forth from the Pleiades, and how it affects things on earth. Can you command the clouds so that a flood of water covers you? And this water imagery, we're going to see this again. This has to do with how the Pleiades and whatever's coming from the Pleiades may have had something to do with the flood of Noah's day. So Job 38, verse 31 tells us that the Pleiades exerts an influence, a heavenly law that is manifested here on earth. And in this next passage that we're going to look at in Amos 5:8, we also see this manifestation or this influence of the Pleiades, and it's how it's connected to darkness and to a flood of water. Amos 5:8. He who made the Pleiades and Orion, and turns deep darkness into morning, and darkens day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the surface of the earth. The Lord is his name. So we see a couple of things here. We see the Pleiades and Orion, which are both in the southern sky, how the flood or waters from the sea can cover the surface of the earth. So Amos is connecting the influence of the Pleiades to changes that take place on earth. In ancient times, various cultures used the position of the Pleiades in the night sky to calculate the beginning of their new year, which began in early November. The passage in Amos 5:8 also connects the Pleiades to a flood of waters covering the surface of the earth. Ancient civilizations were aware of the influence of the Pleiades and its connection to the flood of Noah's day, which in turn is connected to the myths, the festivals, and observations of Halloween, and a precise date, which is October 31st. So we're going to take a look at the Pleiades star sign and its connection, its ancient connections to Halloween. So in the handout here, I have a partial list of ancient cultures that observe the Festival of the Dead in late October and early November. And there are several of these, including what we would call Judeo-Christian celebrations, festivals. And we're going to go over some of these in later on in this video: All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, and All Hallows' Eve. The Celtic and Druids had their festival of Samhain, associated with the legend of Avalon and the kingdom of the dead. The Anglo-Saxons, the Dutch, and the Swedes called November the blood month because of its association with death. In Egypt, they had the slaying of Osiris, the Lord of the Dead. The day that Osiris went into his coffer or his tomb was the 17th day of the month of Athyr, which coincides approximately to late October and early November. The Assyrians had a celebration remembering the souls of the dead late October, early November. Persia had one too, the Day of the Dead in early November, which is the month of the Angel of Death. In Peru, there is the carrying of the corpse and placing food on graves. In Polynesia, the Feast of the Ancestors honoring the dead. The new year commenced in early November with flowers and food placed on graves. In Mexico, you have the Day of the Dead, and it's observed on November 17th. In India, they have the festival of the Durga. The new year commenced in early November with another festival for the dead. The Mayans had a festival too, and this one here, they actually have the fall to earth of the Lord of the Dead in early November. Australians have the Feast of the Dead ancestors. Aboriginal people painted themselves as skeletons and lit bonfires. And in Japan, the Feast of the Lanterns, which is 3 days of duration feast, and there's bonfires and a lot of rituals that they do. So flood stories and catastrophes that covered the whole earth. These are found in every culture and every civilization, and they go back thousands of years. So the deluge and related stories of this worldwide cataclysm and the destruction that ensued are depicted in carvings, in cave paintings, in artwork and symbols, and memorialized in legends and myths which speak of death, the underworld, and spirits who roam the night. So here's a picture of a cave painting, and you see the bull here, and this is the depiction of Taurus, and up above the bull's shoulder you see, circled in red there, the 6 stars. Sometimes people say there's 6 stars, and sometimes they say there's 7. So on October 31st, if you go out at midnight and you look due south, you'll be able to see the Pleiades directly above. This star sign is anchored to this remembrance of a global catastrophe, and the position of the Pleiades in the sky was used to determine when to commemorate the deluge. When did the flood happen? Well, it happened when the Pleiades were directly above. The Pleiades were there. That was the month during which all of humanity was killed by means of water. So the Pleiades reach their apex on the ecliptic plane every year on October 31st at midnight. If you look south at midnight on Halloween, the location of the Pleiades will be in the same place it was at the time of the flood. In addition, for about 4 weeks from mid-October through approximately November 22nd, the Earth passes through a meteor shower known as the Taurids. The falling stars seem to radiate from the Pleiades. Okay, these are the stars you can't bind. You can't chain these stars. And this star cluster is near the shoulder of the bull. Falling stars radiating from the Pleiades represent the stars which cannot be bound by men, which then influence or have dominion over the earth. So according to Genesis, the purpose of the worldwide flood was to eradicate rebellious humanity and the hybrid Nephilim offspring of the sons of God who mated with human women. So God spared Noah and his family and uncorrupted animals through an ark which Noah built. Genesis 6:4-11. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterward as well. So this is how we know that there was a second incursion of these beings, when the sons of God had relations with the daughters of men, and they bore them children who became mighty men of old, the men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great upon the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was altogether evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he'd made man, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, every man and beast and crawling creature and bird of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. Noah, however, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and full of violence. And God looked upon the earth and saw that it was corrupt, for all living creatures on the earth had corrupted their ways. So Noah and his family, as we all know, very familiar story, they were preserved in the ark, but everybody else drowned in the flood. And the spirits of people who died went into Sheol, which is the place of the dead. And the spirits of the giants, who were neither people, true humans, nor angels, their spirits were left to roam the earth. They didn't have a place to go. They couldn't go into Sheol, which is the place of dead people, the spirits of the dead people. And their fathers, the sons of God, the fallen sons of God, were consigned to Tartarus, which is also known as the pit. Nephilim didn't exactly qualify to go there either. So their spirits did not have a place. And so they roam the earth, and they're always looking for a body to inhabit. So the fallen sons of God, that is, these angels who mated with human women, also called the Watchers in the book of Enoch, they were imprisoned in Tartarus, the pit, and they remain there to this very day, being kept in chains until the end times when they will be judged. And that's in Jude 6. The traditions associated with Halloween memorialize actual events of the flood, and they're commemorated on October 31st through November 2nd. Death, skeletons, monsters, and the macabre are associated with Halloween because the death of humanity and the destruction of unnatural beings associated with the flood. People believe the spirits of the departed roam the earth on this night, and they may, in the form of demons, the spirits of the deceased Nephilim giants. So even the so-called Christian church rode this bandwagon of death, introducing a kind of sanitized version of the macabre Festival of Doom when they introduced 3 days into the church year. All Hallows Eve, which is October 31st, All Saints' Day, which celebrates the martyrs and the saints of the church, and All Souls' Day, which memorializes people in your family or people you knew who were Christians who died. So All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, is a celebration observed in many countries on October 31st, the eve of the Western so-called Christian feast of All Hallows' Day. It's at the beginning of the observance of All Hallow Tide, not like Christmas tide, but it's All Hallow Tide, in the time of the liturgical year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints, they're the Hallows, martyrs, and the faithful departed. In popular culture, the day has become a celebration of horror, being associated with the macabre and the supernatural. This is from just the Wikipedia article. So All Saints' Day in Western Christianity, it's celebrated on November 1st by the Roman Catholic Church, as well as many Protestant churches, such as Lutheran, Anglican, and Methodist traditions. And then All Souls' Day is observed on November 2nd, and it's the day for remembering departed dead in Christ. All Souls' Day, also called the commemoration of all the faithful departed, is a day of prayer and remembrance for the faithful departed observed by Christians. I'm going to read some screenshots, some excerpts from this Randall Carlson's video, The Mysterious Origins of Halloween. And his YouTube channel is called After School, and though I don't think he's a Christian, Mr. Carlson is an excellent researcher and presenter, and I highly recommend watching this particular video. So I'm just going to read some excerpts here. This is The Festival of the Dead by Robert Grant Halliburton, and this is a continuation of some other things that were read on this video that Randall Carlson did. And you have to understand that a lot of the things that I'm going to be reading here were written like in the 18 and 1900s, and so their language and their sensibilities are going to be a little different than how we would necessarily word things today. These aren't my words. These are the words of the people who wrote this stuff. Okay, so a remarkable fact, however, was incidentally forced upon my attention that the memory of the deluge was, by the Mexicans, the Egyptians, and the Jews, associated with the same time of the year, and by the latter two nations as well as in Greece. And with that day, I found some very peculiar superstitions connected in the Pacific Islands as well as among most ancient nations. Among the Aztecs as well as the Egyptians, the deluge was commemorated at the beginning of the year of the Pleiades, i.e., when that constellation culminated at midnight. And then this is from Stansbury Hagar, November Meteors in Maya and Mexican Tradition. This is from 1931. Before the arrival of the first Spaniards in Mexico over 400 years ago, and probably much earlier, the Mexicans told of certain stars called, I can't say the name of that, or falling hairs, which fell from heaven to earth with the Lord of the dead. Their fall was commemorated annually in the Quecholi festival, said to have been held towards the end of October. This festival and the falling of the stars was associated with the end of the world. And in the second sign of Revelation 12, the sign of the dragon, we read about a third of the stars falling. We're going to see how that will play into this story. Now, as we turn to Mexico, we find that the great festival of the Mexican cycle was held on the 17th of November and was regulated by the Pleiades. It began at sunset, and at midnight, as that constellation approached the zenith, a human victim was offered up to avert the dread calamity which they believed impended over the human race. This belief was so remarkable that I cannot omit a reference to it here. They had a tradition that at that time the world had been previously destroyed, and they dreaded lest a similar catastrophe would, at the end of a cycle, annihilate the human race. Star lore of the ages. Far removed from the Aztecs, we find the people of Japan in their great national festival, the Feast of the Lanterns, a feast that is alive today, commemorating at this same season of the year some great calamity, which was supposed to have overwhelmed the race of man in the far distant past, when these 7 little stars were prominent in the heavens. In the Talmud, we find a curious legend associating the Pleiades with an all-destroying flood expressed as follows. When the Holy One, blessed be He, wished to bring the deluge upon the world, he took 2 stars out of the Pleiades, and thus let the deluge loose, and when he wished to arrest it, he took 2 stars out of Arcturus and stopped it. The actual observance at the present day of this festival is to be found among the Australian savages. At the midnight culmination of the Pleiades in November, they still hold a New Year's corroboree in honor of this group of stars. The corroborees are connected with the worship of the dead. Still another custom associated with the Pleiades, which has come down to us, is the November date of our elections. The convocation of the tribal meeting at this time, because of the significant position of the Pleiades being a very ancient custom. Now, according to the book of Genesis, actual date of the flood was on the 17th day of the Hebrew month. So God instructed Moses to change the 7th month to being the first month after the Exodus. Before that, the 7th month, the month of Tishri, had been the first month of the year. And what that does is it makes the 2nd month in Noah's day actually the 8th month during Moses' day and thereafter. So in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, that was the 2nd month then, but it's the 8th month now, all the foundations of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. And that's in Genesis 7, verse 11. So the 17th day of the 8th month in 2024 actually correlates with November 20th. And for those of you who've been watching my channel, you'll know that November 20th appears on the timeline that I have as the day when the 5th trumpet is going to sound and the occupants of the pit will be released. And those occupants of the pit are the same fallen angels who were put in the pit at the time of the flood. And also, this is the date when the rapture window for 2024 closes. So, for 5 months, the occupants of the pit who are going to be released, they're going to be permitted to torture mankind, anybody who does not have the seal of the living God. And that seal, of course, is the Spirit of God living inside of them. So these angels are the same angels, and there's been more added to them, I'm sure. Who were placed in the pit thousands of years ago on the 17th day of the 8th month. These angels actually hate mankind. They loathe him, and they, according to certain extra-biblical sources, are going to seek to avenge themselves for what was done to them and their offspring at the time of the flood. So in the passage in Revelation 9, verses 1 through 6, talks about the events associated with the 5th angel blowing his trumpet. And I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth. And he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. And he opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. And then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions of the earth. And they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they're allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is the sign of the dragon, because I believe that the Pleiades and the day that the Pleiades reach their position in the arch of heaven, that is somehow tied to the sign of the dragon. So the sign of the dragon is actually the second sign that's in the heavens that's described in Revelation chapter 12. The first sign is called the Great Sign, and that took place on the 23rd of September in 2017. So the appearance of the Great Sign, that is the sign of the woman, this astronomical alignment that's spelled out very nicely in Revelation 12, 1 and 2, what that sign did is that it firmly placed us in the end times. We're right there in the middle of the book of Revelation. And remember, Revelation is not written chronologically. So the first sign is now past, and we are awaiting the second sign in heaven, which is the sign of the dragon. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. And she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which to be nourished for 1,260 days. So the sign of the woman was a literal heavenly sign, a real astronomical alignment witnessed in the starry heavens. The sign of the dragon may actually meld together a literal sign, that is a literal star sign, that being the Pleiades, the position of the Pleiades, along with actual fallen angels who come to earth. So the stars not only are real stars, but they actually are also fallen angels. So these two themes of falling meteors or falling stars mingled with actual fallen angels can also be found in many ancient myths and stories. So this leads me to consider the idea that there may be an actual date hidden in the sign of the dragon, that date being October 31st. The Pleiades are at their zenith on 10/31, that is October 31st, and the star cluster may influence the Earth at that time by casting forth its unbindable stars with the arrival of the torrid meteor shower, which may actually begin a few days before October 31st. And since the stars also represent 1/3 of Satan's total angelic forces being cast to the earth, this is where the literal star sign and the spiritual component of the story meld together to influence the earth. What is the most likely day for the stars to fall? That is, these stars to be cast to the earth, both the literal stars and the spiritual stars, which are angels. Perhaps Halloween night, when the influence of the Pleiades exercises dominion over the earth. I just want to read again the passage from Job 38:31 to 35 about the Pleiades. Can you bind the chains or the influence of the Pleiades, or loosen the belt of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear and her cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? Can you command the clouds so that a flood of water covers you? Can you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you? Here we are. Now we know that the great sign of Revelation 12:1 and 2 took place over the Feast of Trumpets in 2017, over a biblical feast day. It was right at the tail end of that feast day. And what that suggests, to me anyway, is that we are now in the book of Revelation. So the sign of the dragon and the falling stars may also be associated with a different kind of appointed time, not the Feast of Trumpets and really not another one of the Lord's feast days, but instead a date which memorializes the great flood of Noah's day, a date which is connected with the end of the world that then existed. Could it be that as we approach the end of another age, that the position of the Pleiades in the heavens will be the star sign associated with the sign of the dragon? And if the prophecies that some people talk about the 3 days of darkness have any validity at all, October 31st through November 2nd may be those 3 dark days because of what we read in Amos 5:8. He who made the Pleiades and Orion, and turns deep darkness into morning, and darkens the day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the surface of the earth. The Lord is his name. So I just want to take a minute here and decode the sign of the dragon. I've done this in a lot of other videos, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again. So we know that the dragon symbolically represents Satan. That's Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who's called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And this is after Michael casts Satan and his angels out of heaven. The passage in Revelation 12 where we talk about the sign of the dragon is not when Michael's casting everybody out of heaven. It's about when Satan is on the earth, and he's the one who takes his tail and casts a third of the angels to the earth. So the male child of Revelation 12 represents firstborn sons. This is a firstborn male child. This is an heir. These are believers who are going to rule with Christ during the millennium. They're pictured in Revelation chapters 4 and 5 as 24 elders. The number 24 is symbolic. 24 is used in 1 Chronicles chapters 24, I think, through 27, where David is given from God, given the method for how Solomon was going to administrate his kingdom. There's 24 courses of priests that rotate into the temple. There's 24 groups of singers, and there's 24 this and 24 that, and they're all associated with the reign of King Solomon, with his the temple and all of that. And Solomon's temple is a prophetic picture of the millennial reign of Christ. So it's only fitting that the number 24 be associated with the elders, the kings and priests, the firstborn who are going to rule with Christ. Well, these elders are pictured as kings. They're wearing crowns. They have golden bowls of incense that lets us know that they're priests. They are judges because they are seated, and that was how people judged in those days. They sat on thrones. They also have harps in their hand, which shows that they are worshipers. So a lot of people look at this passage, it talks about the birth of the male child, and then it talks about Satan, the dragon, wanting to devour the child. And then it mentions that the child is caught up to God and to his throne. And what most people do is they say that the birth of the child and the rapture of the child happen on the same day, and that they're basically the same things. But they're not really. The catching away of the child is different than the birth of the child, and Satan is going to try to devour the child as soon as it's born. So what does it mean for this child to be born? Well, I believe what it means is that people who are part of this group, believers, are going to be changed from mortal to immortal in the twinkling of an eye. That passage in 1 Corinthians 15 isn't talking about the rapture. The twinkling of an eye is how quickly we're going to be changed from having a mortal body to having a celestial, immortal body. Then we'll be here for 8 days, and on the 8th day, that's when the male child was presented to God. For 7 days, the male child would be with its mom, and then on the 8th day was when the child would be given to God. That's That's how things worked. There's always 8 days associated with the birth of a male child. The woman symbolizes the constellation Virgo, and she's also the remnant of Israel. And this remnant is going to flee into the wilderness. These are the Jews living in Judea who will flee at the time of the abomination of desolation. So the travail and labor and birth pangs of the woman represent a time of extreme distress for Israel, picturing war or an invasion and what appears to be certain doom. And the Gog-Magog invasion of Ezekiel 38 and 39 may be the war that's going to fulfill the prophecy of the travail of the woman. And if that's the case, then this war or invasion will be initiated by the Lord when he puts the hook in the jaw of Gog. The invasion will be brought to a swift end by means of a huge earthquake in Israel, rain, hailstones, fire, and sulfur falling from the sky, perhaps the effects of a meteor storm, maybe the torrids. Ezekiel 38, 20 to 22, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the cliffs shall fall, and every wall shall tumble to the ground. And I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the Lord God. Every man's sword will be against his brother. With pestilence, with bloodshed, I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain upon him and his hordes and the many peoples who are with him, torrential rains and hailstones and fire and sulfur. As is the case during an actual labor and delivery, once the baby is born, the labor is over. And so if we apply this labor birth symbolism to this prophecy, then once the war is over, that is, the labor is over, believers will be transformed. That is, they'll be born. Or it may be that believers will be transformed first, and then the war will be over. When that happens, Gog and his armies will be destroyed, and the skies will rain down fire, sulfur, and hailstones. However, none of this is going to affect any transformed or immortal believer. So here's something else. In addition, and I'm saying an if here, if the child must be born while the sun is still in Virgo, then the child needs to be born before the sun exits the constellation, which would be on, you guessed it, November 2nd. So, am I predicting that our transformation will take place sometime between October 31st and November 2nd? Well, I don't know. I don't know if that will be the case or not. All I can do is analyze the biblical prophecies and the known signs that are in the heavens and try to connect them as best I can with what I see taking place in the real world. So the star signs are just one component of the prophecies. In addition, Israel must be in an unwinnable war, with the potential of her standing alone against the world, which is what the woman in travail represents. When a woman is in travail, they are the ones who are hurting and nobody else, and they are the ones that have to deliver the baby. There is nobody else. It's just them. There also must be multiple wars and rumors of more wars about to take place, plus the very real possibility of worldwide famines and pestilence. So the end times will see the convergence of many end time prophecies, and all of them, or most of them, many of them, coming together at the same time. So now I want to take a look at falling stars, which maybe meteors or whatever, and the 4 trumpet angels. And what I want to do here is I want to tell you something. That is, we see the elders in Revelation chapter 5, and they are praying. They have golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. Okay, so they hold the prayers of the saints in these golden bowls. Then when you get to Revelation 8, starting with verse 2, we read that an angel takes those bowls of incense, those prayers, and puts them on the altar and mingles them with more incense. Okay. Now, in between Revelation 5, where the elders are praying, and 8, starting with verse 2, where the angel takes those prayers, we have chapters 6 and 7. Chapter 6 is actually the seals, and it's just a list, okay? And that's how you have to treat that list. Everything isn't in chronological order here. You don't have 6 seals and then the sealing of the 144,000 in chapter 7, and then the great multitude appearing, and then the 7th seal. Okay, what you have is a list of six signs that are going to be viewed from the earth, or when the 6 seals are open, all those events are going to happen on the earth. The 7th seal is something that takes place in heaven, but it's not connected with the trumpets, okay? And what we have is an unfortunate placing of chapter and verses, okay? Chapter 8, verse 1, that talks about the 7th seal, is actually part of the seal stuff, and it should be listed with the end of chapter 7. It's not the beginning of the trumpet story. So the whole trumpet story, where we see the angel at the altar and the trumpet angels and all of that, actually is part of that throne room scene that began in Revelation chapter 5. Once the male child is caught up and is in the throne room of God, acting as priests, okay, that's the 8th day. The priests on the 8th day began their service, began their ministry. Okay, and that's in the scriptures. That's part of that ordination period of 7 days, and then the 8th day the priests could go and start their ministry in the temple. On the 8th day, when we as priests begin our ministry in heaven, it's not a marriage supper yet. Okay, that isn't till the end. That's the same day that the first 4 seals, the riders, on those horses, come out, and all of that stuff that goes with the riders on those 4 horses actually happens at the same time. When you have wars, you are also going to have famine and pestilence and all of that. Those things don't happen, spaced out. You go any place that's a war zone within just a matter of days of people drinking bad water and, having injuries that can't be treated and so on. You have a lot of death, you have a lot of disease, and you actually have engineered famine. Okay, so all these things go together. In addition, there's also going to be the first 4 and perhaps 5 trumpet angels and the effects on the earth that go with them. And most of those things that we see happening when the angels blow their trumpets are things that can be associated with a meteor storm, meteors or asteroids coming to the earth. When the angel takes the prayers of the saints and puts them on the golden altar, and the smoke rises before God, verse 5 of Revelation 8, then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. So the first angel blows his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood. This is the same stuff that you saw with the way the Ezekiel 38 war ends, is with hail and fire mixed with blood. And then it says a third of the grass was burned up. So what I'm saying is that when the Gog-Magog war ends with what looks like stuff coming from the heavens, that's going to happen then. And then about 8 days later, it's going to happen again when that first trumpet angel blows his trumpet, and there's more hail, fire mixed with blood that is thrown on the earth and burns up the trees and so on. Then the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And this is possibly a volcanic eruption. And if you have these meteors coming to the earth, especially a lot of them, especially large ones, you're going to end up with a lot of volcanic activity and even tsunamis. And it talks about how a third of the sea became blood. That is, it was poisonous now, and a third of the living creatures died. And then the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch. And this could be something sort of like the meteor that came down that caused the Tunguska event, where This meteor exploded above the earth, and all these trees in Russia, this whole area was basically destroyed. And then the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened. So what we're looking at here is probably volcanic ash that is obfuscating the light of the sun by a third. Another date that's possible for our change and rapture, if you don't want to go with the All Hallows dates of October 31st through November 2nd for being the time of our change, would be November 12th through the 20th. Okay, and this is another 8-day period. And these dates actually coincide with the 7 days that Noah was in the ark before the rains came on the 8th day. So this would align then with other 8-day prophetic windows, if you want to call them that. The male child who has an 8-day period of time before he can be presented to God. Child's born on day 1 and then given to God on the 8th day. The leper also has an 8-day period of time between when he's declared cleansed, when he can offer the final sacrifices in the temple on the 8th day. The king also had an 8-day period of time that he had to wait before it was all official. The priests, of course, had a 7-day ordination, and then on the 8th day they could go into the temple. And anyone who touched a dead body also had to have a 7-day waiting period before they could be presented in the temple or go to the temple on the 8th day. So I just want to take a look ahead now for the week of October 24th through November 2nd of 2024. And I realize that this is a dated video. This is, definitely has a timestamp on it. But I think it's kind of good to look ahead and just sort of see where things are going. And once stuff happens, it's going to happen really quickly. And I think we sort of see that happening now. And there are a couple of other astronomical things that have happened recently, especially this latest comet that we actually saw. It was a naked eye comet you could see in the sky, and we actually saw it here in Idaho. We took a couple pictures of it. And comets, they're known as broom stars, possibly by the way their tails sort of fan out sometimes, looking like a little broom. And they're also said to sweep away existing power structures in order to bring in the new. They are also called vile stars because they herald evil times. In China, comets are considered highly significant as omens, presaging the demise of old regimes with new ones being raised up. And the Chinese have actually kept very meticulous records of astronomical activity for centuries, comets and eclipses and so on. And so in October of this year, and I think some places can still see this comet. This was comet C/2023A3. And Comet Atlas. It was viewed by thousands of people all over the world. So that's one thing. The second thing is we have coming up for that week of October 27th through November 2nd is a predicted higher than normal level of earthquake activity with higher magnitude earthquakes predicted. And this has to do with how the gas giants' planets are aligned and the connections that are between the planets. Every body in the solar system has an electric connection with other bodies in the solar system. When the forces are aligned in a kind of peculiar way, there tends to be more earthquake activity. We also hear of wars and rumors of wars, and we can look forward to, I believe, supply chain woes. Israel has claimed that it's going to attack Iran before the elections in the United States on November 5th. China is on the verge of attacking and invading Taiwan. North Korea is threatening South Korea. Russia and China have pledged to aid Iran should Israel attack. And if war breaks out in the Middle East, the price of oil is going to go through the roof. It's going to skyrocket. And if oil blows past $200 a barrel, commerce will start to grind to a halt. The supply chain, of course, is going to falter, and there's going to be shortages of everything. Another thing we can look forward to is a possible power grid failure. And this could be a shutdown due to a cyber attack on the power grid, or it could be a coronal mass ejection from the sun, could be an EMP. There are a lot of causes, things that could be behind a power grid failure, and it's possible that that could happen during that week as well. We see an impending economic crisis brewing, and we have the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa, and they're spearheading what may be the potential de-dollarization of the world's economy. And while world leaders are currently meeting, like today, they're meeting in Kazan, Russia, to discuss and finalize their monetary strategy, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are holding their own meetings. And basically, no matter what happens here, the financial underpinnings of world markets, which are currently linked to the dollar, are shifting rapidly. Not to mention the U.S. debt, which is like just skyrocketed. We also have the Taurids meteor shower coming. This is the yearly meteor shower that originates in the region of the Pleiades. And we can expect this as well, peaks around November 1st to 3rd. So the star sign that's associated with the sign of the dragon in heaven may be connected to the position of the Pleiades on October 31st. This astronomical alignment commemorates the judgment of Noah's day, incorporating the imagery of falling stars and falling angels. So in this picture, we see a rattlesnake glyph and the stars that symbolize the Pleiades. And just as the rattlesnake shakes the rattle in his tail as a warning, the Pleiades warn that judgment is near. So the Pleiades are associated with falling stars and falling angels and the end of the world. And because we're told that the sign of the dragon is a heavenly sign, and the fact that the Pleiades are mentioned 3 times in the Old Testament scriptures, we need to see if there may be any connection between the sign of the dragon and the star cluster known as the Pleiades. If we're raptured in 2024, then there are 2 likely dates for our change and rapture. So in scenario 1, we would look for our change sometime between October 31st and November 2nd, with our rapture 8 days later. And in the second scenario, we have an 8-day period between November 12th and 20th, which ends on the 17th day of the 8th Hebrew month, which is November 20th. The 17th day of the 8th month is when the flood began, ushering in worldwide destruction, the end of an age, and the opening of the pit during the last days. So the same day that the male child, that is believers, are caught up, will be the day that worldwide calamity ensues. The 4 horsemen associated with the first 4 seals of Revelation 6 will begin their ride. The first 4 and perhaps even 5 events associated with the trumpet angels of Revelation 8 will commence as fire, sulfur, blood, hail, and meteors are hurled to the earth. Volcanoes will begin to erupt, and earthquakes will take down cities. Famine, pestilence, and death will quickly ensue. The time of troubles predicted in the scriptures will come like a flood upon the earth. Just to summarize what I've said here, the first thing we have to realize is that God placed the sun, moon, and stars in the heavens to act as signs, and that these we're meant to know what these signs are and to know how they apply to inflection points in God's prophetic plan. The significance of the constellations and the signs in the heavens have been obfuscated by Satan. I believe he does not want us to know what these things mean, but God does want us to know what the meaning of the star signs are and what they have to do with the end times. The star cluster, known as the Pleiades in the southern constellation of Taurus, is one of the few constellations or star groups mentioned in scriptures. So its importance can't be minimized. The position of the Pleiades at midnight on Halloween, October 31st, is the same position it was in when the flood took place. Since ancient times, people have memorialized the catastrophe of the deluge in festivals, in rites and traditions and rituals celebrated over a period of 3 days. The sign of the dragon is associated with falling stars, echoes of the flood, the star sign of the Pleiades, the torrid meteor showers, and the star gods falling from heaven. The star sign of the Pleiades on October 31st may be the warning of our soon transformation taking place around that time, with the rapture 8 days later, and then the beginning of sorrows for the world. Alternatively, because the Halloween star sign of the Pleiades commemorates the flood, and we know the actual dates for the flood, our change from mortal to immortal may take place on the anniversary of the day that Noah entered the ark, with our rapture 8 days later on the day the flood commenced. And finally, in addition to the star signs, we also need to see an increase in the intensity of the current travail or war in Israel. That's my little report for you today. I encourage you to watch the video by Randall Carlson. I thought it was very informative. I've taken quite a bit of his information and sort of passed it on to you. I was unaware of the role of the Pleiades. I'd read about the Pleiades before in the book of Job and in Amos, but I never really thought about what it was saying. And I think that there's certainly an application that can be made between the Pleiades, the loosing of stars, with the torrid meteor shower that radiates from the Pleiades, which also is connected to the gods falling from heaven, stars being cast to the earth, evil coming down, and the end of the world. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hope you'll give this video a like and share it with other people who you think might be interested. And we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.